also playing in other campaign settings, and I was thinking about some ways to sort of put a little bit more life into kind of West Marches style campaigns. The whole idea with something that is something like the West Marches style, where you're going off and delving into the wilderness, is that you are going to be carving out a part of that territory as your own. You're going to make this place more safe for the civilized world, or at least your version of the murder hobo thing that might be the civilized world. And one of the ways that you can do this is by having a hex crawler style of progression. And in order to kind of be in the spirit of that and spirit of being able to go forward, there is a system that I like to call threat. I've been working on it for a few days now and trying to make sure that the encounters are something that is easy to use and something that the DM just can make a couple of clicks after they get a map set up, and can make sure that the world feels like it's dynamic and changing, and that the players' input will have a feel like an impact that they can really feel on the world itself. So basically, what you're going to be doing is you're going to have a base threat level for the wilderness, and this will determine how many encounters you're going to get into and how difficult it is going to be to explore. Now, obviously, if you go through a particular area, it's going to be easier to explore that area going forward. Now, you can also sort of storyline, oh, you guys went to a place yesterday. If you go to that exact same place or that exact same hex, that might change the way that your threat goes, but we'll kind of go into that in just a minute, as you can kind of formally do that by kind of clearing away to a point of interest that you find out about either from other players or from the dungeon master or through play. So the base threat for each wilderness tile is 50%. That means that you have a 50% chance for a random encounter. And the tiles are color coded. The background tiles that are all white are considered to be base threat area, so there's not a lot going on with them. They're just 50-50 chance of things that are going on there. Obviously, if you want your area to be more deadly, you can have the base be higher, or if you want it to be less deadly, you can have the base be lower. Basically, the more that you're going to be doing in a particular area, or the amount of exploration you want to kind of go for and the amount of encounters that you want to have is completely dependent on the campaign. Now, one of the ones that I'm in right now is using a 50% default, so that's what we're going to be using for this example video. Now, when you have something like this, you can have towns, outposts, friendly fortresses, things that help kind of make this area a little bit safer. Towns start off at level 0, and they only help at the town they're actually on. They might also have their own encounter table. You might have something like things that get towns that get invaded or things like that. By default, I was thinking that a individual hex could be just a single 2-hour walk. The Red Marches campaign that we do is in a set of 2 hours, or you could have it as a set of two 2-hour increments, which would be about 10 miles of wilderness travel. You could do 10 miles relatively easily in 4 hours. If you're going into kind of like hostile territory, you've got mounts, you've got things like that. So these are set up in 10-mile increments. So obviously 2 areas will be going through a single hex would require 2 encounter rolls. Going through 2 hexes would require 4 encounter rolls. And the hex is going to be 10 miles across. So if you have a town, that town's not going to be the full 10 miles, but it will actually affect the things that are happening directly around it within its own tile if it is important enough to be considered as a safe zone. In a place like Redmont, which is the campaign that I'm working with right now, it's probably only going to have a single town or single outpost, but you can actually use this for other sorts of things, actually we'll be getting to in a minute. Players can either go on patrol or defeat random encounters in the squares next to the influence radius of the town to make that town safer. It can be shown to influence the area to denote which hexes are affected. So a level 1 town, for here, is going to affect all of the hexes that are directly around it, and will also affect its own hex, but again, its own hex will have its own special sort of encounter table with its own special sort of encounters. Now, you can use a aura set up on Roll20, and I have it as slightly smaller than the 10-mile radius, just to kind of make it clear which ones it's affecting, as it doesn't really have an option for you to have an aura in hexes, unfortunately. So you can see that this level 1 town is going to be affecting the ones directly adjacent to it. And since the base encounter area is going to be 50%, you can then set the tiles around it to be slightly more safe. So these are going to be 40% encounter areas. Now, the way that these tiles are set up, you can actually have a multi-sided token, and you can choose the side, and you can set this slider to be kind of as difficult or as easy as you would like this tile to be. So once you get, by default, a successful encounter per hex in that town's influence radius will gain a level to that town. Now, the levels to the town are designed to be something that is not going to be permanent. You don't permanently make an area of the West Marches safe. It's always evolving, it's always changing, but it may be something that will help the area get a little bit more safe for a short amount of time. And how long that's going to be sort of depends on how active your campaign is. If your campaign is very, very active, obviously you want to keep the world evolving and moving, so that town is going to frequently be leveling up, and it's going to be frequently having the wilds push back and leveling the town back down. And there's a bunch of different methods for doing that. I don't really want to go over them right here because I just want to focus on how this looks like on the map and how this can be represented in play. So if you've got a level 1 town, that means that there are 7 hexes affected. So you've got the hex where the town is in, and then the 6 hexes adjacent to it. So once you've got 7 successful encounters, you will then go to a level 2 town. And that level 2 town will affect many more hexes. So not only does it have the 7 hexes that it is, the 1 hex that it's in, the 6 hexes that are adjacent, but it also has then the hexes that are adjacent to those, so you would take 19 successful encounters to get it from level 2 to level 3. Because of this and because of this scaling, it's going to mean that you're really never going to get an enormous sized town. You're not going to see sizes above, 5. That even a size town, a 5 town, means that you're able to really carve out this whole area of wilderness, and you might even be thinking that, okay, the scale that you have the thing set to, you might want to be knocking down the town a little bit more, making the area a little bit more evolving, a little bit more dangerous, and have things actually threaten the town to try to knock it down a little bit. So larger tiles will also have higher influence on towns that are near them. So if you're only 1 hex away from a level 3 town, that'll take the danger down a full 3 levels. If you're 2 hexes away, it'll take it down. Of a level 3 town, it'll take it down by 2 levels. And if you're 3 hexes away, it'll take it down by a single level. So if you look kind of here on the example that I've given, this is a level 3 town. And this level 3 town will take the ones that are adjacent to it all the way from a 50% down to a 20. Then getting a little bit further, we'll only be knocked down at 2, and then down to 1, and then of course at the edge of the radius, so at 4 hexes away, the influence of the town is pretty much not felt anymore, even though this is a big town with a large patrol and that sort of stuff, as it's been bumped up to level 3 by having a total of 26 successful encounters in the area around, and done a pretty heavy job of clearing this area around. It's not going to have a massive impact, and the wild will be able to fight back. Speaking of things to fight back, you also have things called threats. Now, threats are basically like towns, they're just in the reverse order. These threats increase the danger level in the same influence area, just like towns do, to decrease it. So if you've got a goblin encampment, that goblin encampment is just going to affect the hex that's here or the hex that's directly around. Now, you can also have a threat area that is a threat 0, so it doesn't change anything that's around. It's just sort of an encounter location that might have its own special tables. It might have its own special encounter details for you to denote on the map. But I'm not going to really go over those because that's also sort of an easy, I'm just going to make special rules for this hex, and I'm going to be covering kind of the generic rules here, realigning these things as they're a little bit off. Now, because the wilderness is already very deadly, I have the encounter set to increase by 5% once you get to 50%. So once you get to 50% and you're getting more deadly than the normal wilds, it goes only up by 5% for each increment. So you can also adjust the things as needed, kind of as we said. But the big thing is that you want to sort of encourage the influence or the exploration aspect of West March's style. So if you make it crippling to be able to go out into the wilderness, then your players are really going to be a little bit more constricted to staying in town, or you're going to have to come up with some other systems, like being able to kind of teleport back to town, or being able to set multiple series of adventures, be able to schedule something to say, all right, well, this is going to be a 3 or 4 session long arc, rather than it being simply a kind of sit down and play a more flexible one-time adventure. So if you're getting it from a area that has is close to a town, it's going to go from a 30%, it'll go up to 40% with one threat, but it'll go only from a 50 to 55 if it doesn't have any influence from town and it's only going up by one threat area. Like towns, the larger threat areas change the area around them more than smaller threat areas. So this goblin encampment here, if it's in the middle of nowhere, it's only going to make a small impact on the areas that are directly next to it, and obviously that goblin encampment will have a specific set of stuff for the hex where it is actually inside of. Now, a dungeon, who is a threat 2, is going to have a greater impact on the area around. Maybe this is the lair of some particularly nasty the nasty monsters. There's a horde of orcs here that go out and they raid the surrounding area. So obviously, again, that center hex is going to have its own special stuff, and then around it is going to drastically affect this area. So it's going to bump it up 2 levels from 50 to 60, and then even around the outer perimeter, it's going to be making it a little bit more dangerous, bringing it from 50 to 55. Now, when you kind of have those things together and going opposing, these areas will be affected by multiple threats, and those multiple threats might scale. So if you have the ogre encampment or the orc dungeon, and you have the goblin encampment together, they're going to affect their own areas, as you can see kind of by their auras, to a small degree. But if they are overlapping, that middle area is going to be especially deadly. So you can see that it is adjacent to this level 2 threat, so it's brought from 50 to 60 by this level 2 threat, and then it's adjacent to this level 1 threat, so it's going to be brought up from 60 to 65. Now, just like having multiple areas of influence from threats, you can have multiple areas of influence by having a town and a dungeon, or a town and some other sort of thing affect the same target. So towns and their threats will try to cancel one another out. So if you can see, the area of the town where there's not a lot going on over this way, it's going to function normally. So out here, this level 2 town is too small to affect tiles that are 3 squares away. Tiles that are 2 squares away will get 1 point of influence towards it, so it'll knock it from a 50 to a 40. And then the things that are adjacent, the things that are only a single hex away, they will knock it down a full 2 levels of encounter difficulty, giving that town a pretty safe perimeter, except for the side that this dungeon is on. This dungeon is going to be pressing back against what this town is trying to do, to try to claim the wilderness as its own. Now, obviously, on the far side of town, where there isn't a sort of organized or civilized area, it's going to be especially dangerous in these hexes because there is no opposing influence. The raids from the orcs in this dungeon are going to be able to go out and cause all kinds of mayhem and havoc on this area over here. But between the town and the dungeon, there's going to be an area where the 2 levels of influence are in conflict. So for this area here, for example, this area here is 50% because it is 2 squares away from the dungeon, and it is 2 squares away, or 2 hexes, I should say, 2 hexes away from the town, which would make it go from a 55 to a 40, or 50 to a 40, and then it is also 2 hexes away from the dungeon, so that's going to take it back up from the 40 up to the 50. This tile here is is only 1 hex away from the level 2 town, and so it is going to be taken down like it would be to a 30, but since it is still within the range of this dungeon to some degree, it is going to be brought up from that 30 to a 40. This tile here kind of has the opposite effect. It would be brought up to the 60 by the dungeon, however, because the town is still relatively close, it is going to have some small measure of influence on this tile and bring it down from a 60 to a 55. So as you can see, this is going to make it to where the area kind of feels like it's changing and evolving as you've got dungeons and threats. And I'll show you a bigger example of kind of what this looks like when you apply it on a slightly larger scale. Players can also kind of try to go to a particular area. This is especially useful if you want to have a campaign where you want to get everything done in a single sitting. So if you've got the example here of a level 2 town and the Dark Tower, a level 2 threat area. This is kind of what it would look like between the 2 areas, kind of similar to what we went over here. The things that are directly next to town will be a 40%, and then directly next to the tower will be a 55%. And so there's only 2 hexes separating here, so the kind of obvious path is to just shoot straight towards the Dark Tower. But the thing is if this Dark Tower is going to have several encounter areas, and this is going to be something that is fairly difficult, means you're going to have a pretty decent chance to encounter stuff on the way here, and you're going to have to fight the things that are in the tower, and then have a quite decent chance of fighting on the way back. So in order to sort of to mitigate that to a small extent, or to kind of give the players the feel that they're going to carve their way out and be able to fight their way towards this tower, and then clear the way so that they can really devote a good bit of time there, they can try to clear a path. And if they clear a path, for every 3 encounters they complete, for every 3 combats or whatever you want to do, whenever they deal with a threat in that area, however they want to deal with it, either by having allies or by killing them or clearing monster layers or convincing things to get out of their way, however they want to go about that, they will decrease the path for 2 levels for a period of time. Now the threat level is set as a minimum of 10% by default. You can make it 0% if you want. I just didn't make a hex tile for 0% because I feel like there should always be some sort of small chance of encountering things, even if you've just been there, even if it's something that you guys were just there clearing. The West Marches is a place where there's going to be random encounters. So you don't want that to kind of go all the way down to 0, although obviously these defaults can be changed if you kind of like the difference in feel. So if you've got a tile that's 55% and you guys clear out 3 encounters worth of stuff, then that 3 successful encounters will knock it from 55 to 40, and if you clear 6 successful encounters, that'll knock it from 55 all the way down to 20%. So you have a fairly safe time in that area. So this is what this will end up looking like. With 3 successful encounters, you'll have a path that goes from the town to the Dark Tower that goes to 20% and 40%. So you'll still be quite safe near the town, but as you kind of go a little bit further towards the Dark Tower, you're still going to have a decent encounter chance. Not as much as you would if you were trying to come from the sides or come from a non-direct route, but it will be something that makes it a little bit easier to get there and get back. And now, however, if you do a full 6 encounters, that's going to be a pretty long work day of making sure that you've cleared that path, so you are ready to be full strength to be able to take down this tower. It's going to be quite easy to get to the tower and get back from the tower without having to worry about stuff, because you've really kind of scorched earth here. You've gone in, you've kicked ass, you've taken names, and you've sort of momentarily claimed this area. Now, the big thing with this is that you, again, want the world to evolve. You want it to change. So depending on how active your campaign is, the period of time could be anywhere from a week to a couple of months, and that's going to be in real lifetime. So the purpose of this is to allow them to complete dungeons that are faraway threats for a limited time frame without having to worry about running out of time clearing or are too far away from the dungeon. And again, if you want to change the sort of ratio, so like if you're only clearing away 1 hex, for example, you could say, well, we're not going to do you're not going to do 3 encounters to clear 1 hex, we'll just do 2. Or if you're going to clear, 5 hexes, it wouldn't make sense to just do 6 successful encounters that would get you 5 hexes worth of impact. Maybe then you're going to have to increase it by a certain number or a ratio. It's kind of up to you to play with the numbers, but the key thing here is to be clear with your players. If they are going to do an adventure like this, where they're going to really clear a path to get to where they're going, they really should have an idea of exactly how much their impact is going to be, or at least have a general idea of how much their impact is going to be. Now, again, because this is going to be something that evolves and changes, if this threat area changes, it might get a little bit more dangerous, or it might get less dangerous. So, say you've got this whole thing here, and you've got this area cleared out, but over the course of the week, the person who's in the Dark Tower, or whatever the threat is, it's the enemy that's in the Dark Tower, it might go from a 2 to a 3, which will impact all of the areas around it, and it'll fully scale this back up from a 20% up to a 30%, because it's now becoming a more deadly place. It's becoming a bigger threat. Or if you have other sorts of things that are going to modify these areas, you can definitely make sure that it continues to evolve. This shouldn't be just a permanent, oh, we've cleared the way, or even just something that the players can 100% rely upon, but you do want it to make it feel like they are definitely having an impact. So what this is going to look like on a bigger scale is going to set you up to have a encounter map that is going to be able to be pretty detailed. Now, to kind of make this make a little bit more sense, here's our level 3 town. Now, if you look, it's a little hard to see. I actually have this set on the token layer to kind of show you what some of the math is behind this. And I'll show you a macro that kind of goes with this to make this make a little bit more sense as far as, oh, how do I figure out what this tile is? So if you look, the town here at level 3 has a token on it, a marker of purple to kind of denote what the town's influence is, and it's a level 3 town, so it's got a level 3 marker. So all the ones around it, all the squares adjacent to it will have that level 3 marker, which will make sure you understand that that's what's going on with these towns, assuming that I have everything properly marked. And the further you get away from the town, the less the influence is. So while, yes, it has 3 points of influence here, it's only got 2 here, and only got 1 here, and then 0 on the squares that are out this way. And even the squares that are between it and major threats, like the ones coming up here to this fortress, you are still going to have it having an impact, but it's going to be counterbalanced by the impact of these other areas. So for example, this fortress here, the influence is a 3, as you can see that is marked on the token as being a 3 level of influence. And so it's going to give a +3 to all the things that are next to it, +2 to all the ones that are next to those, and +1. So if you have encounter areas like here, where it shows you as having 1 point of influence from the town and 2 points of influence from this fortress, it's going to get you a net of +1, so it's going to go from 50 to 55% to make it a little bit more dangerous, but it's still being a little bit affected by the town. And if you have multiple encounter areas that are affecting one another, like this fortress and this dungeon, the fortress is at a 3 and the dungeon is at a 2. If you have areas in the middle, that's going to be, like for example, this square is going to be affected by 2 pieces of influence from the fortress and 1 piece from the dungeon, so it's going to have a overall threat increase of 3. And I'll kind of show you what the macro looks like for determining this once we get a little bit more explaining of exactly what's going on here. Now you also have areas that could be very, very dangerous. Things like there's a demon lord that's slowly gathering forces down here, so his encounter area is going to be really rough. It's going to be very difficult to get through these hexes without it being a complete slog. And if the demon lord is definitely something you want to deal with, you might actually want to try to deal with this goblin encampment first, because it's going to make the trip there so much easier. Or you might try to deal with the dungeon over here, as it's going to help these hexes in the middle, even making this dungeon less of a problem. Maybe knocking it from a threat level 2 down to a threat level 1 will mean that these hexes here are not going to be affected by the dungeon making it worse. These hexes here are not going to be making it the dungeon worse. But you could try to make your way out from town to try to carve an area and say, all right, well, the adventurers can go out and we can find a way down here and we can carve this path. So these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hexes here down in a straight line from the town over here, we can cut this place down. You can spend a whole adventure making this easier, because if you don't, it's going to be really hard to try to get to something that's this far away and be able to, deal with it once you're here and then make it back to town without it being a, multiple session, like a whole mini campaign of going to defeat the demon lord. So I've said a lot about how this is all set up and what it looks like, and it is sort of easy to kind of set up the numbers, but sometimes, especially when you've got lots of things affecting a particular square, like this square right here has got something from the green goblin encampment, it's got something from the demon lord, and it's got something from the town affecting it. It can sometimes be a little confusing exactly how you get to that total number. So in that respect, I also have a set of macro set up for these dungeons to sort of make it clear exactly what's going on here. So let's say that you are in one of these squares that are here, and there's not a dungeon around. It's just you kind of need to figure out what the town is going to be like. In Roll20, you can set up a town to have all kinds of different things, but the threat level of the different areas is set up by attributes. So I've set my town level to 3 here. I don't really need this threat attribute now that I'm kind of done fixing things. I've set the town level to be 3, and so all of the macros will refer to the town level 3, which is not going to change nearly as much, ideally, as the areas around it. So, for example, this tile right here is right next to town. It's only 1 square away from town, and so let's go ahead and see what that's going to look like. So if we say we're only a single hex from town, it's going to give me a thing down here. It's going to show me what my encounter chance is. So it says that my encounter chance is only a 20% chance. Now you can also have it set up to randomly roll to see whether you get an encounter or not. And what I'm going to show you here is with you've got a single dungeon. So for example, our area here, that's not enable fog of war, that's a terrible idea. Our area right here, directly below town, or let's say directly yeah, let's go to here. Let's go here, actually, because this will make it easy. This is going to be 2 away from town. Let's properly mark this thing here. It's 2 away from town. So it's going to get a little bit of influence from town, and it's going to be 1 next to this goblin encampment. So we can check this out and say, all right, well, we want to make sure that's correct. So looking at the dungeon here is 2 hexes away from town, or this hex is 2 hexes away from town, and the dungeon level is level 1, and we are a single hex away. So that is going to give me an encounter chance of 40%, and that's exactly what the tile says. Now you can also have it set up to have it roll for you and be able to see what your distance from the town is going to be. So we've got, this is going to be a town level of 3, we are 2 hexes away from town, the dungeon level is 1, and we are 1 away. So that'll do two things for us. That'll show us that our encounter chance is 40% chance of an encounter, and it will also roll on you on a table for you, a D100, to see whether you did encounter anything when you were going through there. And there's a bunch of different ways to have this set up, and I just have it set up as a 0, which denotes that there is no encounter, and a 1 to denote whether there is an encounter. So if you hover over the encounter roll, you can see that it is a 40% chance to encounter something, and the D100 rolled a 72, so it did not roll an encounter. And if you did the same thing again, town level is 3, this town is 2, dungeon level 1. There we go, good. So at that time, it showed you again that's a 40% chance of encounter, but this time, instead of rolling a 72, it rolled a 23, so you definitely had that random encounter, so you'd be able to say that yes, they get an encounter here. So you can actually roll all of the stuff out before you go to the session if you kind of know where people are going, or as soon as they kind of get into that hex and they're going through it, you can have them roll the encounter up in that exact spot, especially if your players get a little sidetracked, or they find out the cool things, or they want to do other stuff, and are the easily distracted cats that a lot of players are, that they will go, oh, we're going to go and defeat the goblins. They'll get out here and then kind of forget what they're doing, or they'll encounter a pack of monsters that might be specific to the demon lord's sort of aura that you've put into the encounter tables, and then go, you know what, we should actually start clearing the way to this demon lord problem, because that guy looks like he's pretty scary, and we need to end up dealing with him before he overruns the world. You can easily show, all right, well, this is going to be how this affects it. You can also change the individual tokens to say, all right, well, the players were doing stuff in this particular area, and let's say that they decided, okay, we're going to clear this area right here. We found some reason that we really care about this particular hex, or they fought multiple things in this particular hex. You can also denote that, hey, the players did something here, and the players have, let's say, worked a little bit on this hex to be able to have it be a little bit more safe. So you can easily just say, all right, well, I'll mark that to say that they've been working on it a little bit. So the next time they come back here for a little while, let's say set it up to let's say it's going to be like 3 days. So if they come back here in the next 3 days, then they will find that it's a little bit easier. So I'm going to make this go down a little bit. I'm going to say that it's going to be a little bit easier to deal with because they've dealt with it recently, so it's down to 30%. And again, if you've got multiple DMs, which a lot of these things will have, it'll be easy to kind of note, if you want to, on this particular hex, exactly what's going on with it. You can make notes to say that this particular hex is or that wrench symbol or something like that is showing that, oh, on the 26th of August, the players did this, and so until the the 2nd of September, it's going to be a little bit safer over in this area. And if you kind of get confused of exactly what's going on, you can obviously just use the macro to see what it's supposed to be by default. And then you can always figure out exactly what the changes are from there. So I'm going to go ahead and change this back to the default of 40%. And so that's kind of the basics of how this system works. It seems like it's really complex on the outside, but what it really should do is allow the players to have a lot of influence over the world, to be able to actually, go to a particular dungeon, to be able to make a plan. All right, we're going to go down and fight the demon lord, so let's clear a way there. Let's kind of put all of our ducks in a row. Or if they do defeat in a particular encounter area, that can really have an impact on the world. Or if they make the town safer, they build up the militia, they can do not only things in the encounter areas, but they can do like role play things to hire people and make the town more safe. Whatever they do to kind of level up the town, they'll actually feel the impact. They can even see the impact if you want to share the encounter roles. You can always have the encounter roles just whisper to the DM instead of being open rolled like I have here. But if you kind of have the encounter roles open rolled here, the players can really get a sense of, oh, we feel like we're actually having an impact on this world. So I hope that was helpful. If you are interested in this sort of system, to be able to kind of work with this, of course you can contact me on Skype. My name is Gravy Mattingly on Skype is the contact request. And if you send me something, I can send you the information about exactly how these macros work, how these hexes work, and obviously I can send you the tokens that I've made up that have these sliding bars on it and stuff like that, and kind of show you what you need to do to set up this whole thing for your encounter table. The basic macros Take a little bit of finagling. I'm not 100% sure I've gotten all of them right. I'm not the best macro writer ever, so they've got quite a bit of breakdown in them to make sure that the encounter table rolls correctly. And if you wanted to have, say, the encounter table be a little different, or you want your world to be a little bit more safe, a little bit more dangerous, you want it to scale differently, you could definitely do that and give you the sort of the work behind it to be able to get it done. So I hope this helps out. And if you were thinking about trying to add an extra layer of exploration and interest to your West Marches campaign, or even to whatever thing you're doing that's using sort of the hex crawler style, I hope this is something that you can have in your toolkit to be able to use.